By the time you guys are listening and watching this, it will be Sunday. So I want to say Merry Christmas, everybody. I hope you all enjoyed your time with your family and ate some good food, got all the presents you wanted, and were overall just safe and happy. So speaking of Christmas films, we're going to talk about my top five favorite Christmas films later in today's episode. But we're going to kickstart things off with talking about Tick Tick Boom, which is going to be probably the title of this podcast when I'm figuring things out afterwards. And this is a great film, definitely one of my favorite Andrew Garfield performances. And it's a musical about a real life story about a guy named Jonathan Larson, and he wrote one of Broadway's most famous plays called Rent, and obviously Tick Tick Boom being the title of the film. And it's just essentially just showing his story, showing his road to prosperity, the struggles he goes through. And it's incredibly inspiring, and we're going to get into why. But before watching this film, I wasn't really a big fan of musicals. It wasn't always my cup of tea. I can appreciate them, for what they are, obviously, but it never really was my go-to. But this film has really made me appreciate that genre, and I'm definitely going to probably start watching some more musical films. Like, I've had tons of people reach out to me and recommend La La Land. I've watched the first 10 minutes of La La Land, or more, probably I'd say more of like the first half hour. And for me personally, I couldn't really get into it, but I think now my perspective has changed on musicals. So I definitely think I'm going to revisit La La Land at some point, probably tonight, to be honest with you, after I'm done recording this podcast here. But yeah, the music in this film was great. I find myself listening to the soundtrack when I'm driving. If I had to pick two songs, my two go-tos out of the soundtrack, it would probably be 30/90 rather, and Johnny Can't Decide. Those are my two favorites out of the soundtrack. And the reason why Jonathan's story is incredibly inspiring is because through the film, he discusses how essentially the film is depicting him and his journey as he's writing one of his plays called Superbia. It unfortunately didn't end up turning out in becoming as successful as he hoped for it to be, but it definitely was a learning experience and a stepping stone to him eventually writing Rent and Tick Tick Boom. But he spent 8 years writing Superbia, constantly rewriting it, changing it to inevitably where he wanted it to be. And don't get me wrong, the audience enjoyed it, and even his agent in the film said people really liked it, but they want to see what you're going to do next. So obviously that means it didn't pan out, unfortunately. And when you spend 8 years working on anything and it doesn't turn out to what you hoped it would, that could be extremely discouraging, and a lot of people would probably just quit at that point or move on to something else. And he was very close, but he kept going. And his agent told him afterwards, she was like, look, I've been in this industry a long time. You got to just keep writing. You got to keep on writing and keep throwing stuff at the wall until finally something sticks. It's truly like that's the honest truth, I guess, for anyone trying to pursue writing. And really, you could say that about a lot of industries. I mean, especially what I'm trying to get into. I'm trying to be an actor, and I know it's going to be difficult, and anything worth doing is at the end of the day. But yeah, and he could have quit. He could have said, okay, you know what? I spent 8 years doing this. Clearly, it's not in the cards for me. But he was confident in himself, and he said, okay, you know what? I'm going to go back to the drawing board, and I'm just going to write the next one. And that's what he did, and it obviously ended up working out for him. Eventually, he wrote Rent and Tick Tick Boom. But yeah, I don't actually know if he finished Tick Tick Boom because unfortunately he passed away at 35. And actually, how he passed away was incredibly tragic. He passed away the morning of Rent's debut on Broadway. Just take that in for a sec. A play that this guy worked so hard on. Now, obviously, he knew it was going to Broadway, so, I mean, that in and of itself is an accomplishment. I mean, how many human beings on the face of this earth can really say they were on Broadway, right? So obviously that is an accomplishment, but he didn't get the chance to see it blossom and see it, establish itself. So that obviously is very unfortunate. And obviously so young too, 35, not even middle age at that point yet. And yeah, just overall his story is incredibly inspiring because it's all about being disciplined, trusting your intuition, because you're going to have a lot of people tell you that, you're not capable of doing it. It's you're not good at it. And, I've even had people tell me that, podcasting isn't a viable option as an occupation, or acting is incredibly, tough, and, only, X number of people have made it. I've heard it all before, and I'm sure anybody else that's pursuing anything has probably heard from other people how difficult things could be. And most of the time, the people saying those kind of things are usually people that are close to you and people that love you. So they're all, most of them are saying it with the best intentions. So you always kind of have to remind yourself that, because, they just want what's best for you, right? But you have to be able to remind yourself that, like, yes, I can do this. I'm capable of doing it. And if I trust myself, I know that I can get it done. And that's pretty much what you have to constantly remind yourself, because you, at the end of the day, are the only person that's going to be able to make significant change in your life. Right? You can't really rely on people to change your circumstance and, change your outcome. So, but anyways, I'm getting on a rant here. Overall, I love Tick, Tick, Boom. Highly suggest you guys check it out. And I think right now we're going to move on to, I'm going to talk about Hawkeye. And I'm going to discuss the season finale because it was yesterday, and I'm going to give my overall review and score of the show. So episode 6 came out yesterday, and I watched it. And honestly, overall, it was just... Oh, by the way, before we get into this, spoilers, obviously. I mean, the show's been out for over 24 hours, so if you haven't watched it at this point, that's on you. But anyways, besides that, it was kind of underwhelming, the season finale, to be quite frank with you. And I would probably just say it was okay. Like, it wasn't bad, but it wasn't really great at the same time. If I'm comparing it to the season finales of the other Disney Plus shows, overall, I think out of all the Disney Plus shows, my two favorite finales were Loki's and Falcon and the Winter Soldiers. I thought theirs was incredible, especially Loki's, when they introduced Jonathan Majors as Kang, which is a nice little introduction to his character, because we're going to see him as the main antagonist in not Loki. Well, we actually will in Loki season 2, but in Ant-Man Quantumania, he's going to be the main antagonist. But overall, it was, like I said, kind of underwhelming. It wasn't all bad. I mean, this wasn't bad, but it wasn't all underwhelming. There was, it had its moments. I really enjoyed the inevitable interaction that we knew was coming between Clint Barton and Yelena Belova. I liked that. I liked how Clint is obviously telling the truth that Nat sacrificed herself to save the world, and Yelena, you could tell that she just can't accept that. She almost wants Hawkeye to be the one that murdered her sister, so she has an excuse to sort of unleash her rage. She almost can't accept the fact that Hawkeye didn't kill Natasha. In reality, Natasha actually sacrificed herself for the greater good of humanity. So that was nice to see. And I'm really starting to enjoy and like that character. I liked her in Black Widow, and I'm really curious to see where she's going to go next. I think Tom Holland said that he would love to sort of team up with her. I think that'd be an interesting pairing for a film. But if I could see her in another project, which she obviously will return, we all know that, it's kind of tough. Aside from like a cameo, the next time I think we'll see her in a significant role, I'd probably say, if I had to take a guess, I could be completely wrong. I don't know. That's tough. I didn't even think about this before the episode. I'm kind of just spitballing this one. I would probably say we'll see her in something to do. I mean, an obvious answer could be like something to do with Hawkeye. But if I'm pointing to like another hero, I would probably say the Captain America 4 film with Anthony Mackie. I think that's probably when we'll see her again. Could be wrong. That remains to be seen. And then Kingpin. That was one of the biggest mysteries of the show. Who was the uncle character? I think most people probably thought it was Kingpin, but we saw him teased in episode 5, and now we've seen him. And I mean, I'm gonna be honest. I haven't watched the Daredevil show on Netflix. I did mention to you guys last episode that I started it, but I haven't even really had time to continue watching. I've just been so busy with the holidays and stuff. So I haven't really seen Kingpin in that show. So I'm not sure if this version that we're seeing in Hawkeye is the same in terms of like how he acts, or if it's different. But either way, I didn't really think he was very interesting. To be honest with you, he's obviously strong. Like he's fucking picking people up and whipping them around and shit. But overall, I didn't really think he was very interesting, to be quite honest with you. And a lot of people are wondering, is he dead? I personally don't believe he's dead. Now I know that the show is trying to make you believe that Echo shot him because obviously she was pointing the gun. But then the camera pans up and then you hear the gunshot, but you don't know if he's dead, right? It kind of leaves it up for interpretation. And because of that, I do think we'll see Kingpin, Vincent D'Onofrio return as Kingpin, especially with... Oh, actually, we'll get into that later. I was about to give a Spider-Man. Actually, I mean, look, I'm going to talk about Spider-Man spoilers later. I might as well say it now. We see Matt Murdock in Spider-Man No Way Home. So, I think the next time we'll see Kingpin will probably be in whatever project that Daredevil ends up getting. I do hope he gets his own movie because I don't know too much about Daredevil, and like I said, I just started watching the show, but just that cutscene alone, I don't know why, it just got me so hyped. It just got me so excited to see that character return. I thought that little short clip of Matt Murdock coming in saying like, Happy, I know your affiliation with Stark Industries, and you better lawyer the fuck up, bro. Like that was, I don't know why, that was so cool. And with him, obviously in the MCU, we know one of his biggest villains in his Netflix show was Kingpin. I watched little videos here and there, just sort of, breaking down the show. So I know a fair bit, but I haven't obviously watched it in its entirety. What else here? In the character of Jack, which was Kate Bishop's mom's fiance in the show, I feel like he was kind of underused a little bit. Like I was really starting to come around to him by like episode 4 when we see him get arrested, and he was like, I'll have this figured out in no time. Don't worry about me. I don't know. I was really starting to, get behind his character, and the show kind of misleads you a little bit. They make you think that he's a bad guy, but inevitably you realize that it's really the bad guy in the show, aside from Kingpin, obviously, is Kate Bishop's mom. She ordered the hit on the old guy that died in the first episode, or the first or the second episode. Whoever that old dude was who fucking was murdered in his whatever condo, that was Kate Bishop's mom was responsible for that. So really, she was kind of like the evil one in the show. Now the post-credit scene. Oh god, I don't even know. I mean, first and foremost, I think this was probably the worst post-credit scene that I've seen in a Marvel film, and I think that could just be my fault because I've been conditioned now to expect some sort of tease for some sort of future property with these Marvel movies and shows, and all this post-credit scene was just the Rogers musical in its entirety. We saw the Rogers musical in the first episode, but we just saw like a short snippet of it before Clint Barton walked out of the theater. But all this post-credit scene was literally just the Rogers musical. Like, I watched the whole thing and I was like, okay, they're going to tease something. They're going to say something, to show some future Marvel property, but they didn't. It was literally just the musical, and I was so disappointed. I mean, the musical wasn't bad. Like I thought it was interesting. But for a post-credit scene, I mean, if they're going to do that, they should have also had an end credit scene, which they didn't. It was literally just the musical. So for those of you who haven't seen the season finale and you don't care about spoilers and you're here just listening to me talk about it, once you're done the episode, you can honestly shut it off unless you really want to see the musical, because you can watch that and you're not going to miss, or sorry, you can skip that and there's nothing significant that you're going to miss from that post-credit scene. But I mean, in conclusion on Hawkeye, I thought the show, overall, I thought it was good. I thought it was serviceable, in the sandbox of Marvel Disney Plus shows. I'd probably give it like a 6.5 out of 10. I thought it was good. Not great, but not bad. Just sort of, in that middle, that sort of gray area. But compared to the other shows, I would probably say this is my least favorite. And in a way, that's almost a compliment to Marvel, because like I just mentioned, I overall thought the show was good. Yet I still have it as my least favorite out of all the other shows. So that just shows that there has been a consistent detail to the quality of these shows. And the next show that I'm really fucking excited for is Moon Knight. We got a short little tease of Oscar Isaac as Moon Knight very briefly at some Disney presentation a couple months ago, and that was enough to get me invested and to sell me on the idea of that show. So that is going to be the next show that I'm really excited for. I think that the next show in line, though, in the Disney Plus lineup of Marvel shows, I think is I'm forgetting her name. Let me look it up here. I know it's the character that's going to be co-starring in the next Captain Marvel film. Disney Plus Marvel shows lineup. Miss Marvel. Yeah, that's going to be coming out next year. So next year we got, let's look here at the upcoming Marvel TV shows. So, like I said, we got Miss Marvel. Then we got Moon Knight. And then we have She-Hulk, which I'm really excited for. In fact, I think She-Hulk is going to be the next time that we see Daredevil, because of the whole lawyer thing. Because for those of you who don't know, She-Hulk is a lawyer, and I feel like that'll just be an easy opportunity for them to reintroduce, not reintroduce, but bring back Charlie Cox as Daredevil. And then it says we have an Untitled Halloween special, probably just going to be some little short thing. And it also says we have a Guardians of the Galaxy holiday special coming in next December. And then it says Loki season 2 to be TBA to be announced. And that comes from Cinema Blend by Jason Wise. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly. So next year is going to be a big year for comic book movies and movies period. But I think what do we got? So we got, for films, we got Doctor Strange, we got Thor, and then I think Black Panther as well. So we got, let me double check on that. I think that's actually coming out in 2023, which is also going to be a big year. Black Panther 2. Let me see here. I think it's called Black Panther 2 Wakanda Forever. Let me see IMDb. Excuse me. It says in production, expected to be released November 11th. So at the end of the year is when we're going to be seeing that. and that's going to be coming out in 2022, next year. I'm really excited for that. I'm really curious to see how they're going to handle that situation, because with that situation, I immediately was in the camp of like, I thought they should just recast T'Challa and bring in a new actor to play Black Panther. But then as I sort of sat back and thought about it, I actually think it'd be very interesting to see what direction they could go if they don't cast him, and how they could honor Chadwick Boseman's legacy in the film. And the one thing that I'll always give Marvel credit for is their ability to make the narrative make sense with situations like this. Not that we've ever had an actor in the MCU pass away, but I'm confident in Kevin Feige and the writers and the very smart people they have behind these projects. I think they'll find a very unique and clever way to make everything make sense, if that makes any sense. But yeah, and then Thor. Nobody's really talking about Thor. I'm really excited. I think that film is going to be, number one, I think it's going to be hilarious, especially with with Taika Waititi. I definitely butchered that pronunciation. When is that coming out? I know it's coming out next year. If we go back to IMDb here, it says July 8th, 2022. That'll be a great time of year to release that film. But my most anticipated film of next year probably would be The Batman still. I said this on my last show when I was talking about Spider-Man. Spider-Man was great. I still feel it's the best Spider-Man film of all time. And we're going to talk about Spider-Man towards the end of this episode. But I was always a little more excited for The Batman. And I still am to this day. I think what Matt Reeves and Robert Pattinson are going to put together in that film is going to be unlike anything we've seen in that, with that character. And I am counting down the days at this point. I am absolutely excited, and it can't come any sooner. And I think that's going to be coming out in March, if I'm not mistaken. Sorry, I keep looking up things here. Just don't want to be incorrect. The Batman. I think it comes out in October, if I'm not mistaken. Let me see. Screen Rants. Oh, March. Even sooner than I thought. Look at that. I've heard like 5 different dates for this film because it's been delayed and, pushed back so many different times. Yeah, this cast: Zoe Kravitz, Andy Serkis, Jeffrey Wright, Paul Dano, Colin Farrell, and then obviously probably my favorite actor in Hollywood right now, Robert Pattinson. And then we have Matt Reeves, who I think is a fantastic director. Yeah, we got a lot of big films coming out this upcoming year. And I don't want to talk too much about the next year films because that's an idea I have for another episode. But anyways, that's going to wrap up my thoughts. Overall, Hawkeye was good. Not the best. Probably my least favorite out of all the other shows. But overall, still pretty good at the same time. So next, we're going to talk about my top 5 Christmas films to watch. And we're going to start from number 5 and we're going to go to number 1. Number 5, I got How... Oh, sorry. No. I just teased that's my number 1, actually. Shit. Okay, so number 5, I got The Night Before Christmas. It's a comedy with Anthony Mackie, Seth Rogen, and Joseph Gordon-Levitt. Absolutely hilarious. So it's pretty much like these guys. They've had this tradition, their whole friendship of like the night before Christmas Eve. They go out and they party, they have fun, they get shit faced, whatever. So that's a great film. Then at number 4, I got Christmas with the Cranks. But now that I'm looking at my list here, I might have to make a minor tweak. I think I'm going to take out Christmas of the Cranks, put it in my honorable mentions, and swap that out with Elf, with Will Ferrell. I think I'm going to put that at number 4. And, I don't really got to talk about Elf. You guys have probably seen it. It's an absolute classic. One of my first introductions to Will Ferrell. as an actor. And I became obsessed. I watched pretty much every movie he did after that. I think that's really the main one, though, that kind of kickstarted his career, if I'm not mistaken. I was actually listening to Adam McKay, who's been the director of a lot of the films that Will Ferrell has been in. I think he was saying that, people knew who Will Ferrell was, but Elf really kind of elevated his name during that time. And let me see here. Okay, so third, I got the old puppeteer claymation, whatever you want to call it, version of the old Rudolph and the Red-Nosed Reindeer, the classic one with Yukon Cornelius and Jack Frost, or not Jack Frost, whatever the snowman guy that sings the song Silver and Gold. And then number 2, I got the Polar Express. Love that film. That's usually one of the first that I watch when I approach December and we're getting into that holiday season. And then at number 1, I got How the Grinch Stole Christmas with Jim Carrey. That is by far, not even close, my number 1 favorite Christmas film to watch. I love Jim Carrey. I love this portrayal. The ability, kind of like how I spoke about Willem Dafoe last episode, and Willem Dafoe's ability to change his face and his expressions. Jim Carrey has that same characteristic. The things he could do with his facial structure and the way he can make himself look like a completely different person is incredible. Now, obviously, he's wearing makeup and stuff, and obviously when he's playing the Grinch, but he does this smile and this grin that's just, I love it. So the movie Spider-Man No Way Home, it's been out for a little over a week now, so if you haven't seen it at this point, you're probably not that interested. I'm not going to say that's the case for everybody. I know some people at certain parts of the world, movie theaters are shutting down, but I think for the majority of people who haven't seen it, they probably just aren't very interested. So now we are going to be talking all about Spider-Man No Way Home and all the spoilers and everything involved with the film. Last episode, I spent basically the entire episode just covering my thoughts, my non-spoiler thoughts, and how I felt overall. But yeah, let's get right into the Spider-Man stuff. So, like I mentioned before, haven't watched Daredevil, but that cameo scene with Matt Murdock when he showed up to Peter into Aunt May's apartment and basically just told him look, the charges got dropped, but you're not out of the woods yet. So love that cameo scene. We're pretty much just gonna talk about the main thing, the main surprise. Basically, I heard someone call it the worst kept secret in Hollywood. I heard some other content creator call it that, and he couldn't have put it any better. I think it was that guy named Chris from 3C Films. I think is the name of his channel. But yeah, he basically said this was the worst kept secret in Hollywood, and it truly was. But that is what we're going to talk about, because that's really the meat and potatoes of this film. I was so fucking hyped when Toby and Andrew showed up. We all knew it was coming, but when they did, it was absolutely incredible. I've heard some people say they kind of had a problem with how they were introduced with, Ned sort of just all of a sudden, casting spells and opening portals like Doctor Strange. I personally thought it was kind of, funny and clever. And when Andrew showed up, I was so hyped because I never really appreciated the Andrew films. But after watching Spider-Man No Way Home, I can kind of look back on those films with a different point of view. And I'm actually really interested to see if they would actually revisit his films and give him that third movie to complete his trilogy. And I'm actually hearing reports that is on the table. Because obviously people are reacting very positively to Spider-Man No Way Home. So if enough people are showing the demand for him to return, then they're going to do it, because it's a license to print money at that point. And I mean, Toby's Toby. I mean, when Toby came back, that was probably my favorite moment, because Toby, for me, his Spider-Man is probably overall my favorite just for pure nostalgia. From a pure comic book representation, of the character, like the best overall, most accurate to the source material, I would pick Tom Holland. But my favorite overall Spider-Man is probably Tobey Maguire, because I grew up watching his films. I'll never forget when Spider-Man 3 came out. I knew I was going to go see it. It was the end of school. I think I was in grade 4. I was 9 years old or something. And I was just waiting for my mom to pick me up from school. And we went right to the theater. Got my goodies, got my snacks and shit. And I watched Tobey go up against Topher Grayson as Venom, who was actually referenced in this film. I love that scene. Overall, I love the banter between them and the discussion that they have. And Tom asks Tobey and Andrew, he's like, what's the craziest villain you guys have gone up against? And I fucking love when Tobey actually referenced Rhino, which I never would have thought that would have happened. He's like, I fought this Russian dude in this big metal rhinoceros suit. That was absolutely incredible. If I had to pick 3 favorite moments between the 3 characters of all 3 Spider-Man, I would say third place would probably be the back crack scene. That was fucking hilarious. That was so funny because it referenced the point of the film in the original Spider-Man when Tobey was like, my back, because apparently he was actually experiencing back problems, on the set of the film doing some stunts. So that was hilarious. That was a nice little callback. But also I love when Andrew's like, yo, do you want me to get that for you? Yeah, I got you. Come here. And then it's like, oh, all right, you got me. I got it. That was so fucking funny. So that was third. That would be my third favorite moment in the film between those 3. And then the second, I would probably say, honestly, number 2 and number 1 are probably interchangeable. I love the scene when they're interacting in the lab, and they are. Let me actually think about this list. Yeah. Okay. So, anyways, I love when they're interacting in the lab and they're creating the serums to cure the villains, to make them not evil anymore, I guess. And I love when they're talking about the web shooters. That was absolutely fucking hilarious when Tobey's Peter Parker shoots his web out, and then they're like, that came out of you, dude. And he's like, you can do that, can you? That was so funny because obviously Tobey and Andrew, they have web shooters, right? They've built this mechanic with their suit. It doesn't just come out of them. And then they reference, Andrew asks Tobey, he's like, have you ever had a blockage? And Andrew's like, yeah, I sort of had, I had this sort of existential crisis. And that happened when, in Spider-Man 2, I think, or Spider-Man 1, when Tobey was swinging through the air and then all of a sudden, he couldn't shoot his web and he was just sort of gliding in the air. I think that was a reference to that, which is great. And then my number 1, I'm going to sort of break the rules a little bit. I got a tiebreaker here at number 1. I'm going to pick 2 moments that I equally loved. And the moment when Andrew and Tobey first meet Tom Holland, that scene was incredibly emotional because obviously Peter had just suffered the death of Aunt May, and he doesn't understand that these 2 other Spider-Man have gone through similar tragedy in their respective universe. And at first he's like, you guys couldn't possibly wrap your head around what I'm going through. And then Tobey's like, when my Uncle Ben died, and then when Andrew's like, well, when Gwen, who's my MJ, that was incredible. And speaking of MJ and Gwen, if anybody, most people have probably seen Amazing Spider-Man 2. Obviously Gwen dies in that film, and Tobey gets his chance of redemption. MJ falls off the Empire State Building, and Tom goes to catch her, and then Willem Dafoe as Green Goblin sort of cuts him off midair, and then Andrew saw that as a chance to jump off the building and save MJ like he wanted to with Gwen, and that was incredible. I love when they land to the ground, and you could see he's holding back tears because this is exactly like the moment of when Gwen unfortunately died, and that's what he wanted to do. He wanted to save her, and the fact that he got to do it, he got that second chance to do it with MJ, and that was just a great moment for me. And then so That, and then obviously tied for number one would also be the scene when they all start swinging together. That was just pure just fan service. I absolutely love that. That was probably my favorite scene of the whole fucking movie. Now, speaking of that though, it was all great. The only problem I had with those scenes was, and I heard Chris from I mentioned earlier 3C Films talk about this. The CG in that scene for Tobey Maguire, for his suit, was a little off. A minor nitpick, albeit, but I don't know. The CG was kind of off. The close-up shots, it definitely looked like the suit, but the shots when he's swinging around, like when he's first fighting Sandman to take him out first, that for me, I could kind of notice a little bit. It looked a tad bit off because with the Tobey suit, the webbing on like the suit looks like really like thick, if that makes any sense. Like, almost like as a kid, you read those comic books and sort of the text is very the text is like raised. If that makes any, I feel like I'm explaining this wrong, but in this, it almost just looked like too CG at times, not all the time, but at times. Andrew's suit looked absolutely incredible. It looked the exact same as it did in the Amazing Spider-Man films. I feel like that's something I say so much when I talk about this film, is absolutely incredible. I feel like I'm just repeating myself at this point. But it truly was. It was an event. And like I mentioned, we all knew they were going to be in this film. If they weren't, it would have been like the biggest missed opportunity in Hollywood. You know what I mean? You're going to bring back the villains from their films, but you're not going to bring back the main protagonist. Like, if it was flipped, like if we had Tobey and Andrew from the get-go, from the beginning of the movie, and we didn't have the villains, they could get away with that. Like, we would talk about it as fans. We would say, oh, like, that would be so cool if like we have Andrew, we have Tobey, but how cool would it be if we had like Doc Ock come back and Lizard and, Green Goblin? Like, that would be cool. But I mean, hey, at least we have the other Spider-Man. That would be okay. But in the case of this, you're going to bring back the villains, but not bring back the original Spider-Man. Like, for me, that would have been the biggest missed opportunity. Can you imagine if they did something like we're getting in the point of the film where we realize, oh, we're about to be introduced to the other Spider-Man, and then the Spider-Man that come on screen, what if it was just alternate versions of Tom Holland as Spider-Man? Like, different haircut, different hair color, different suit, but just different versions of Tom Holland Spider-Man. Can you imagine how big of a disappointment that would be? That would be similar to the Ralph Boner character from WandaVision, but it would have been 10 times worse than that. Like, with that one, I didn't really care with WandaVision because I didn't really expect him to sort of be the main Quicksilver. But yeah, that would have been funny, but that also would have been heartbreaking at the same time. Overall, just so many great moments between everybody in this film. Everybody being really, I'm just referring to Tobey and Andrew. They had so many just funny and just emotional moments, like I mentioned with the whole Uncle Ben thing. And I love the moment when Peter said, like, with great power comes, and then Tobey finishes his line. He's like, comes great responsibility. Tom Holland's like, how do you know that? And then, they all went through their own similar experience in their universe. I thought that was great. Pretty much every time I saw Tobey on screen, I just had like the biggest grin on my face. Like, I just felt like a little kid in a candy store at that point, because I was just being reminded of all the fun experiences I had watching his films as a kid. I think I even had the Spider-Man 3 like book or whatever. So, I mean, say what you will about Spider-Man 3. It's not a great film, but it definitely has its moments, and it holds a special place in my heart. It's like a guilty pleasure of mine, I guess I could say. And I loved how they, like I mentioned, I loved how they talked about their villains. They talked about their fight scenes, and Tobey's reaction to Tom Holland saying, like, I fought like a purple guy in space. That was hilarious. He was like, I still can't wrap my head around the fact that you went to space. Like, that was hilarious. And then Andrew sort of feels like he's like the the least cool one, the one who isn't as cool, compared to the other Spider-Man being Tom and Andrew. I mean Tom and Toby. And then Toby kind of goes over to Andrew and sort of like, it reminds him like, stop with this, stop with this talk. You're amazing. You're great. And I loved how Toby almost kind of had like that mentor role in this film. Cause I mean, he is the oldest, he's the most experienced one out of the three of them. He's the first one, the first live action Spider-Man. And, speaking of a mentor role, we did have a reference to, Miles Morales. Jamie Foxx said to Andrew's Peter Parker, he said, hey man, like, why isn't there a black Spider-Man? Like there's gotta be one out there. And, I'm sure at some point we're going to get Miles Morales. It's only a matter of time. I'm really curious to see when we're going to get that. I really do hope sooner than later because I think he's a great character. And whenever Marvel decides to introduce Miles Morales, I really hope that they use that as an opportunity to bring Toby back, and then Toby can sort of be that mentor to Miles, because I know that there's like a 7 to 8 year age gap between Peter Parker and Miles Morales. So I know like that would obviously, like, Toby would obviously exceed that unless they decide to bring Miles in as like a 30-year-old, but I doubt that. They're going to want to bring someone in that's young and that can play the character for a long period of time. So I really hope whenever they decide to bring Miles Morales, whether it's his own movie or in another film, I really hope that they bring back Andrew to sort of be like a guide for him. And then, yeah, this film was full of Easter eggs. When the multiverse is starting to like open and tear apart towards the end of the film, and the climax when Doctor Strange is like, I can't stop them, they're coming through, or whatever the fuck he says. You see it in the sky. If you look very, very closely, you could see the silhouette of different Spider-Man villains. Like you see Rhino, and I think you see Craven the Hunter, if I'm not mistaken. Which, speaking of Craven the Hunter, recently there was a casting news when it comes to Craven, and Aaron Taylor Johnson was cast to play Craven the Hunter, which I think is a very interesting casting. I think he's a great actor. I loved him in Tenet. He was kind of like a surprise in that film. First of all, I didn't even know he was in Tenet, and then when I saw him, I was like, damn, like he did a really good fucking job. I loved him in The Savages. That's probably my favorite performance of his. Obviously, Kick-Ass, and then he was in Godzilla, which is pretty good as well. And then, what else can I talk about here? I got a bunch of notes. My favorite fight scene. Now, there's a couple. Obviously during the movie we see that Peter, he's trying to do the right thing. Now it was a mistake for him to just bring the villains over to hang out in Happy's apartment, but he's trying to do the right thing. And then that is sort of when shit goes to hell, when he gets his little spider sense and he realizes like, Green Goblin's up to no good. Willem Dafoe's up, he's back to his evil side. And that is sort of where we're going to transition. There was two big fight scenes between Peter Parker and Green Goblin, but my favorite was the end of the film, because at that point, obviously, Willem Dafoe's character Green Goblin, he killed Aunt May, and this is what I was referring to in episode 14 last week when I said Peter was fighting with a lot of rage in this film, and that's the reason why, because he's not pulling his punches, because he's pissed off, because his fucking guardian, his basically his mom, Aunt May, she was killed by Green Goblin. And that last fight scene, you could tell Tom brings all the energy, all the emotion, the anger, and he's about to. This is probably one of my favorite parts of the film, what I'm about to talk about. Right when Tom has Willem Dafoe on the ground, and he's about to, give him that last punch, he picks up the glider, and he's about to kill Green Goblin. And then, of course, who better to stop him than Tobey Maguire? Tobey Maguire's Peter Parker, when he stepped in and he gave him that look like, I've been through this, Peter. I know that you think that killing the man that killed your aunt is going to make you feel better, but in reality, you're still always going to grieve. You're still going to miss him. It's not going to change anything. The only thing that's going to change is that you killed somebody, right? Why stoop down to that level, essentially? And that scene was amazing. It was so fucking awesome. And then Green Goblin stabbed Tobey Maguire, and I was like, no, is this really how they're gonna like end that character? And then he kind of gets up and he says, I'm fine. Like, this ain't my first rodeo. I've been stabbed before, right? That was kind of funny, but overall, I mean, yeah, I'm sure I'm probably going to end this podcast and then think of some things that I missed to talk about. Actually, here, let's quickly talk about the ending. Yeah, we got to definitely talk about that. We're going to talk about the ending and the post-credit scene, and then that's probably going to be it. I do want to apologize overall. This episode is going to kind of be on the shorter side compared to others. This is just a crazy, crazy week for me. The holidays is a crazy time of year for a lot of people. I got like 3 different families going to, like, not families, but like 3 different parts of my families. I have my girlfriend's side of the family, then I got, my aunt's, my extended family, and then obviously I got my family that I spend most of my time with here. Yeah, so the ending. I love the ending because we see Peter Parker, Tom Holland's Peter Parker, we see him going and finally living on his own, and almost like very reminiscent to Tobey Maguire. He's living in this like shitty little apartment, and he's really on his own. And I feel like, I heard somebody say that this trilogy was almost like his origin story. And to a degree, I kind of agree with that, because we've seen him progress from being very dependent on Tony Stark to now being his own man. And he truly is Spider-Man at the end of this film. And one of the best moments is in the ending. We see that he's actually creating his own suit. No more, Stark Tech, AI system or whatever. He's got his own suit. And I think it looks beautiful. The blue is very shiny, very reflective. And I think it looks probably the most comic book accurate suit that we've seen thus far. And I know I've heard some people, worried if Tom Holland's going to return, because he's been saying things like, I want to start a family, which is all fine. I respect that. But make no mistake, he will be back. I can almost guarantee. I don't know for sure, obviously. It's not like I just, called Tom Holland before the podcast. I don't know that to be certain, but I mean, by the ending of the film, it's almost guaranteed. And we've heard, Kevin Feige and Amy Pascal, say that we've already, come to terms for another trilogy and another set of films with Tom Holland. So we're going to see him back. It's only a matter of time. It's probably going to be a good couple of years before we see another Spider-Man film, because with this trilogy, there's been a film like every other year. So in like 5 years, we got 3 films. So I don't think we're probably going to see that 4th Spider-Man film. Probably not for like another 2-3 years, I would say. Probably not till like 2025, to be quite frank. Actually, that's a little far. Probably like 2024 or 2023, one of those two. And yeah, I mean, I'm looking at my notes. Oh yeah, I also missed one of my favorite shots of the film. One of my favorite just like pictures during the film was when it was right after when Tom Holland had that first fight with the Green Goblin and Aunt May died, and then he's up on that building, crying, obviously very emotional, and he's just looking up at J. Jonah Jameson, just talking shit, and it's raining. That was just a beautiful shot. Just had to quickly get that out of the way. Now, the big question that people are asking is Tom Holland's Spider-Man gonna remain in is he going to remain in the MCU, or is he going to transition to the Sony verse? And I think the answer is a bit of both. And I think the next film that we're going to see him do will be a Sony film, but I think they did the ending of this film in a way that's very smart, that they're going to reference Spider-Man. They're obviously going to. Doctor Strange is going to reference Spider-Man, I'm sure, in the Multiverse of Madness. So they're not going to ignore any of the events that took place between him and the MCU. They can't, right? From a narrative perspective, like, what are they going to do? Retcon everything? But now that they know, or now that they don't know who Spider-Man is, which is Peter Parker, because obviously all the Avengers knew who he is, that is going to give Sony the opportunity to sort of, take him for the next couple films. And then I think down the road, when Spider-Man and Tom Holland does want to return, and it does make sense from a narrative perspective, I feel like we'll see him back. at some point. And yeah, see, I'm already thinking of more things to talk about, like the ending when, when we see Spider-Man, when we see Peter Parker and he goes to that little bake shop where he knows that MJ and and Ned are gonna be, and then he was going to go in there and he had the note. He already had everything scripted and ready. He was gonna tell them like, "Hey, I'm Peter Parker. This is who I am. Doctor Strange had to wipe away everybody's memory, but you were my girlfriend, MJ, and Ned, you were my best friend." But he decided in that moment, maybe now isn't the time. When the time comes, then I will tell them who I am. A lot of people I've heard some people say that he's just never going to approach them again, and he's basically just going to let them be because out of fear of endangering their lives. And to a degree, there's some truth to that. But I do think at some point we will see Tom Holland's character as Peter Parker reintroduce himself to MJ and Ned. I think he realized that it was a little too soon, and he's going to give them time to, get settled, go to MIT, which is referenced a lot in the film. And then I think when he feels that the time is right, then he's going to return and reintroduce himself. And it'll just leave room for that to be reapproached in the sequels and stuff. And yeah, so I think I got everything. I think I touched upon everything. That's probably going to wrap up episode... the post-credit scenes. Let's get to that. It's out now. You can watch it. The Doctor Strange teaser trailer. It looks absolutely fantastic. I can't wait to see. Ever since WandaVision ended, and we heard from all the outlets like Variety and Deadline that Olsen, what's her name? Emma Olsen? No, what's her name? The main character from WandaVision, Wanda, once we heard that she was going to be co-starring Benedict Cumberbatch in Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness, I was immediately excited because I loved WandaVision, and I was really excited to see what she would do with Doctor Strange. This is going to bother me here. Elizabeth Olsen, Emma Olsen. What the fuck was I saying? So once Elizabeth Olsen was cast... in Doctor Strange, I was incredibly excited. I was already excited, but yeah, and the movie just looks like it's going to be absolutely just nuts, and I cannot fucking wait. And then we got the Venom post-credit scene, which was kind of bittersweet because, telling by the last post-credit scene from... Hey everyone, I do want to apologize. There was something wrong with my camera, and I couldn't record... the rest of the episode, but you can still listen to it. You can still listen to the rest if you want on Apple Music or Apple Podcasts, Spotify, any listening platform of your choice. So just head over there, check it out if you want to listen to the rest of the episode.